ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming for this session titled Navigating the Legal, Tax, and Regulatory Frameworks for Oil and Gas, Governing Oil and Gas and Energy Regimes in Africa. This session is hosted by Centurion Law Group, a Pan-African law group operating in all 54 countries of the continent. And I have with me my esteemed panelists, all of who are from Centurion, who I'm proud to have introduced themselves one by one. Starting from Keseena, please.
So I'm Chengadu, and I manage the Mauritius entity.
I am Gari, Matarirano, and I'm based in the Jombai office of Centurion Law Group.
Hello, I'm Anna Vizcarro Dyombe, and I am an associate at Centurion Law Group, Malabo.
Perhaps I'll do the introduction. So we have Keseena Chengadu. She's the director of Centurion Mauritius. We have Gari Matarirano, the senior counsel at our South African office. Gary, you're blocking someone. So we have Anna from our Equatorial Guinea office. We have Grace Yella. She's the head of our tax and legal in the CEMAC region. We have Alexey Khromov from Russia. He heads one of our international advocacy divisions. We do have Rachel. She's from our South Sudan office. And we have Yorm Abledu from Ghana and Tamara Jombai from Nigeria. In the interest of time, I'll get to it quickly. Africa remains one of the most attractive destinations for investment, due largely to the untapped resources, opportunities for business, and the fact that you're here alone shows that Africa continues to be relevant, specifically for the oil and gas sector, with what's been going on in countries like Namibia, what we have in Southern Africa, Nigeria getting new investments, and with all of the overhaul in the legal and regulatory landscape, it is very clear that at least for the next 2-3 decades, oil and gas development, energy development will be they'll be active, very active. There'll be a lot of activities in the sector. And we've always considered a Centurion Law Group that one incentive, country by country, is the ability to have legal and tax professionals who can help you navigate the landscape and assist with from inception to closeout of businesses across the continent, starting from the DD phase to perhaps the sale of the business or decommissioning, as we say, the oil and gas sector. So we've brought together some of our professionals across the continent to discuss some of these topics, also create an opportunity for our guests to ask questions on particular issues that they have encountered across, walking across the continent. It's important for us because at Centurion, we're one firm operating across the continent. We work together, we are on ground. These are internationally trained lawyers from all over the world who have dealt with very serious issues in jurisdictions like South Sudan up to more crystallized environments like South Africa. I myself, having worked in Nigeria for about 10 years before moving to South Africa. So I'll go straight to it and start from Nigeria. Usually at the point of investment, the first stage is to perhaps have a due diligence exercise. And clients often want to know what the lay of the land is, want to, of course, investigate the soundness of whatever they have in terms of the target for each country. What are the issues that you face? What should new entrants into the African oil and gas and energy landscape be thinking about? What are the issues that you've dealt with, and what do you advise?
Okay, when you're coming into the country, you just need to decide on the size of the company or the business and the vehicle you want to use to, take up the business, and the kind of project you'll be doing will determine what you would do. So those are the things you consider, the type of business you do, the projects, if you are going to be looking for financing within the country or from outside of the country, if you're going to be repatriating funds. So those are the things. And then if you would have, if it's going to be a fully locally owned, or you're going to partner with locals. So those are the things you consider to set up your business. And it has been made so easy because back in 2021, there was an implementation of the digitalization of the incorporation process. So everything from A to Z is done online and digitally. Not just the incorporation process. So even after your business has been set up, if you need to do any change of directors or any change of shareholding, everything now is done online. So this makes it so fast to, carry on your business, set up your business, and operate in Nigeria.
Thank you. Then we'll go further. Following your due diligence phase, and perhaps when an decision to invest, has been made, there are in-country rules which become very important to follow. Forget about the commercial value of your investment. Most countries in Africa, you will encounter things like local content rules or indigenous participation rules, which means that you have to involve nationals in your business, whether or not they do have the financial capability to co-venture with you. How, Rachel, how have you dealt with this in South Sudan?
Yeah. In South Sudan laws allowed actually foreign participations and involvement of business in South Sudan, particularly like Company Act and Investment Promotion Act. And it depends on the nature of the company that investor want to operate in South Sudan, actually. That's why one of the conditions says that in the Company Act that for investors has to have local shareholder which carry 31% in the company.
Thank you, Rachel. Some of these issues, we've dealt with our clients. Requires some sort of structuring, which is acceptable to the regulator, and also as well, considers the risks that investors are looking to mitigate. So I will take this further and ask from Grace, what are the ways that investors can engage to ensure that they do have a proper structure within the country, also considering tax rules, because you would have the dichotomy between ownership and also revenue flows.
Okay, I'll speak with regards to the CEMAC region, because most of the countries in the CEMAC region have similarities when it comes to tax issues. So with the OHADA laws, it makes it easy for investors to decide which form of a company they should opt for. They have the possibility to go for a branch, which according to OHADA laws, it should last for 2 years. And they also have the option for subsidiaries, which could last for up to 99 years. So there is like a wide possibility or options that investors could use to set up a business in the region. Now, with regards to tax aspects, each country under the CEMAC region, they have their particularities when it comes to tax. And all of these countries, the similarity, one of the similarities is that they opted for the declarative method. It means each investor has the possibility to do its own declaration, like you declare what you have earned and you declare what you have to pay as tax. But it becomes complex now because the tax authorities they have to come after to review or carry out investigations to confirm that what you actually submitted during your file, in your returns, is actually what you're supposed to do. So in a nutshell, or in brief, that's the tax aspect in the CEMAC region.
Thank you, Grace. Now we'll go further. In terms of operating in Africa, especially for multinationals, most investors have gone all the way straight from the countries of origin into Africa, not taking into consideration opportunities that exist with setting up a holding structure in Africa. And this often leads to a loss of revenue, significant loss of revenue. For example, double tax treaties within African countries, and with the AFCFTA coming on stream soon, there's significant advantages which could reduce, revenue loss from 20% in terms of withholding taxes to 5%. And when you talk about billion-dollar investments, this becomes very, very important to understand. So working with local lawyers will be the best way to go. Keseena, I'll leave this to you. Mauritius seems to be one of the most attractive destinations for holding structures in Africa.
Yes, I think indeed it's good to use Mauritius as a hub within Africa, especially when multinationals want to invest into Africa. So one of the advantages, I think I would say, is the banking systems. We know very well within Africa it can be very difficult actually to do transactions, especially when there is foreign exchange control, for example, in South Africa, in Nigeria, and Ghana. And Mauritius doesn't have foreign exchange control, so it allows investors to do transactions within Africa more easily as well. And regarding banking systems, I would say that it takes 3 to 5 days for transactions, banking activities, payments in and out of the country to be done. So that's also a very good advantage. And Mauritius is known as the first in Africa for ease of doing business by the World Bank. So another reasons as well, Mauritius has 46 DTAs in Africa, across the world, and it helps entities that is doing business in Africa to use Mauritius in this regard. For instance, like Zion said before, we have South Africa that has a withholding tax of 20%, and if you use Mauritius as an entity that holds shares in the South African entity, it reduces to 5%. And that's also applicable in different varieties of percentage in Namibia, in Mozambique, and a couple of other countries as well.
Thank you very much. Local content manifests in several ways. Shareholding in the company, which would require, some sort of dividend repatriation. Ultimately, you also have local content in terms of using local manpower. And often, especially for capital-intensive industries like oil and gas and most of the energy industries, investors always have this problem of balancing, having the best hands to work within the organization or for the project, and adhering to local content laws in terms of getting the right content required per industry. Grace, I'm going to ask you, how have you navigated this in Ghana?
Yeah.
Ghana.
Yorm.
Sorry. Yorm.
Yes, thank you. So in Ghana, we have a robust regulatory framework when it comes to local content. As lawyers, we're able to guide our clients or investors through the processes and the systems and the right people to speak with the right authorities to deal with, so that they are compliant with the law.
Okay.
Thank
so
you.
what I hear is that while the regulations and the laws do dictate very strict rules, there's a fine print which requires, perhaps waivers. Some countries like Nigeria have had very robust local content laws, which prescribe workable solutions for each scenario. Nigeria also being a much bigger jurisdiction, where you have more technical support for projects, becomes easy to navigate within that jurisdiction. But for other jurisdictions, you do have significant problems in terms of getting the right hands to, or competent hands, which would work on projects in view of the local content laws, which you also have to adhere to. I'm going to double up on that question. Gary, what have you seen in South Africa, and are there any, suggestions you have for clients or, potential project promoters within the continent?
No, absolutely. South Africa, as you know, is comparatively speaking, significantly industrialized, and it enjoys quite a few advantages for potential investors because of the availability of professional services firms, the ease of forming a company in South Africa. It's a matter of days that you can do it. The tax system is quite sophisticated. It's got a deep source of funding through the banking and financial market system. So South Africa itself obviously has been going through a phase of energy supply constraints, but definitely it's an attractive market in terms of how the private sector actively builds infrastructure. There's a successful renewable energy program that's been ongoing for the last 12, 13 years in phases. So it is a good hub in addition to Mauritius, to which potentially private sector players can look in terms of expansion into the rest of Southern Africa. Because there is a symbiotic relationship between how the private sector operates and in a sense the public sector as well acknowledges what urgent things need to be done in order to promote energy access as well as expand markets such as the oil and gas sector, which obviously is experiencing some issues on the permitting side. So I think South Africa does play a central role, even in terms of creating a single common market within the immediate region and wider continent on free movement of goods, services, and people, because that's what these natural resources like oil and gas are typically contiguous. So you'd want the commonality in approaches on regulation in terms of investments incentives, so there's consistency across the board. But I think the bite-sized chunk approach on regionalization could be a way of aggregating the competitive advantages of the continent, I think.
Good. And just to add to that, with the AFC FTA, there's a lot of movement of goods, services across the continent. It's also, indicates movement of skill sets, and therefore there would be better advantages to aggregate, technical resources from across the continent to fulfill this. So there's more of an African content kind of regime, in the offing, and perhaps that would be a way for investors to navigate the continent while, fulfilling local content rules. Perhaps, Anna, let me ask, for labor issues, which sometimes seem like, box-ticking exercises, many of these things have resulted in significant losses for many clients. Specifically, I've seen quite a lot of that in Equatorial Guinea, where you work. How do you navigate the labor issues? What should investors know from day one in setting up, sort of a labor practice to avoid pitfalls? What are the unique laws and regulations that you have in Equatorial Guinea, and how have you assisted the clients? What advice do you, have for clients in engaging with professionals to deal with labor issues?
Well, I would say that the labor law is too protectionist with the employees, so that's an important thing to know. And also, we should have into account that when it comes to the labor issues, normally is related to expatriates. So yes, we have this kind of discrimination or discrimination issues that rises a lot when it comes to payments of expatriates and local employees when they have similar, not similar, even the same role, that they do the same role and they get paid differently. So there is a lot of issues regarding this. And I would recommend to companies to just nationalize the contracts from expatriates employees to avoid these discrimination issues. So yes, that's I think the most important thing.
Thank you very much. Alexey, just asking, you've navigated Africa for a short period. What are the issues that you've seen in regards to ease of movement, of people, sharing of services, working across the group? What are the issues you've seen from a foreign perspective?
Well, from my perspective, I think that I know that a lot of African countries have local shareholder laws, which are for foreign companies. It means that a certain percentage, for example, in South Africa, the percentage of the company which should be owned by a local person is, I think it goes up to all the way up to 40%, depending on the industry that you work in. I think many investors may not find it very attractive, despite Africa being a very nice place to invest, and not only for natural resources all over the place. The markets are not very saturated. In some cases, they're not saturated at all. The population is constantly growing, and it is already quite high. So it's a nice place to invest. It's very attractive. But the fear of an investor is that he has to give up the average percentage that he has to give up is about 25% if we're not talking oil, gas, and mining. So I think something should be changed in that. It is obvious that the government should empower its community, should think of the best interest of its communities. But I think that thinking about how attractive your country is for investment is also very important. I'm not saying that you should get rid of it. I think there should be a more equilibrium should be found between the interest of investors and interest of the local population. Because if investors find the country more attractive, there will be more investors, more investment, which in case will as well raise the will improve the quality of living for the locals as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Just one other, item which investors continue to talk about, ease of doing business. There's soft issues like availability of foreign exchange to service operations, obtaining of business permits, just general business support issues, which investors and foreign companies, multinationals try to go it alone. There are a lot of advantages to engaging local experts in getting to the yes on some of those issues. Keseena, I know you've dealt with assisting a lot of companies get around some of the difficult things across the continent in terms of making payments, in terms of getting permits, reducing the burden in terms of amount of documentation required to get things done and lead time on such. Just have a brief discussion on how you've assisted clients and what investors should know and how they can get these things easily compared to what they have currently.
Yes, so what I would say is there's a lot of facilities that Mauritius provide. For example, you have investor permit, you have a professional permit as well. And just to say, it's very easy if you want to work and live in Mauritius, you get a 10-year work permit for a few $100, to be honest. So it's quite interesting in this end. In terms of KYC, I think like Mauritius is known to be a bit bureaucratic in this regard. We like to have all our KYC documents ready, but once you start doing business in Mauritius, it's pretty easy. Like the authorities is flexible with you, the bank is flexible with you, and they help you to try find solutions as well as getting the work permits as well. Also, one thing I would like to point out is it's commonly known that many countries, jurisdictions doesn't like to work with PEP clients, for example, but Mauritius work with PEP clients as well, and it's just we need extra KYC in this regard. Yeah, I think like this is briefly what I would like to say about the work permits.
Thank you. Also for new rules, ultimate beneficial ownership, some of these issues which traditionally have not been issues that investors have had to deal with significantly in Africa. Some of these are coming up, and many of our clients are wondering how to navigate this. Gari, I would ask you, what are some of these new rules that have come up in South Africa, for example, and what should potential investors across the continent and even existing investors know about how this will shape the future of their investments and potential pitfalls ahead?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of the regime in South Africa, we, a country where downgraded from, within the Financial Action Task Force to a grey listed, and it means that we needed to strengthen our internal controls against money laundering and terrorism financing. So this involves, reforming a few pieces of legislation to ensure that you can detect or identify ultimate beneficial owners of companies. And I think that several steps have been taken so far in creating that transparency, that availability of information. I think this will go a long way in making South Africa another option on the continent, in creating a Southern African hub for your business. I think one other area that I think the government has put its focus on is the visa regime, which at the current moment presents some issues in terms of processing of business permits or work visas. And I think the government has now recognized that it can partner with the private sector and has mooted what they call it a trusted employer scheme, whereby companies can be listed on the database of the Department of Home Affairs, and if you're listed there, then it means that you don't have to produce the myriad documents and information for employees who want to get visas to work locally. I think that will go a long way in addressing some of the red tape and bottlenecks and processing timing issues. And I think that's significant for the country, because the country, just like the rest of the continent, has got a young population, it's growing, it's hungry for skills, hungry to leverage off the technology that comes with energy investors. And I think if that is resolved, it will go a long way on also reducing unemployment, because you provide an available pool of foreign skills from which young professionals can learn from, artisans. So I think those are the issues. I think investors would welcome that as a development and step in the right direction. Also, there's further deregulation in the energy sector as well, to allow the entire world or universe of private sector players to generate their own energy and inject it into the grid, because without energy you can't even begin to attract investors. You can't even begin to tell your story to investors, even for the region, because South Africa is such a huge economy. we can't even market the region as a whole, as SADC, as it were, to the rest of the continent and to the rest of the world. So energy is a sine qua non basically for getting the basics right. And I think those are some of the things I think that private sector investors can start looking at and saying, there's transparency in terms of who owns what. There is deregulation, decentralization, and decarbonization going on in South Africa, which is a plus. And you also have a visa regime that is going to be easier to manage, and also obviously everything is going online, so the application process is going to be quite quick as well. So, and for our fellow African compatriots, the more and more visa waiver programs are being introduced, which will make intra-Africa travel so easy to do from a business perspective as well.
Thank you. Before we go to some of the bright spots, I think there's one issue in Central Africa specifically which investors in the oil and gas sector have struggled with, and that's the issues relating to the foreign exchange policies in Central Africa. Grace, could you please discuss this, or especially how you've dealt with what the issues are and how you've dealt with this and what you're seeing that investors could find very useful?
Okay. If you remember, in the year 2000, the CEMAC regulators came out with the CEMAC exchange regulations, whereby foreigners or foreign investors were obliged to, they had difficulties to repatriate their funds. There was a lot of procedures, a lot of constraint for them to repatriate their funds from CEMAC. So I think with all the troubles, all the issues that they were facing, the CEMAC regulator had to come up again with another law in the year 2019, I think, whereby those laws have been softened in the sense that now foreign investors have the opportunity, they can open offshore accounts where they can use to repatriate funds out of the CEMAC region easily. And then secondly, the exportation proceeds that they make, they have the obligation to repatriate it within 150 days opposed to 30 days before. So I think it becomes very easy for foreign investors to come into the region and continue with their business.
Thank you, Grace. What I hear you say is that it becomes increasingly easier for investors to
yes,
deal with
it
forex
becomes easier to it becomes easier for them to handle foreign exchange issues in the region.
Thank you. Perhaps the brighter spots and the ease of doing business across the continent. I recall, when I started off as a lawyer, perhaps takes a month or two to incorporate a company, and most African countries now have a one-stop shop. They have online avenues for incorporation up to, tax compliance. Tamara, this is particularly your area. Could you please let us know what updates you've seen across the continent?
Okay, just like you said, previously it used to take months to incorporate a company, but now with the digitalization, you can incorporate a company in less than a week. Not just incorporation, even because Nigeria recently implemented a regulation that allows for visa on arrival, business visas on arrival. So that is also done online. So it takes 24 hours to obtain that, and once you arrive, and this is available for all African countries, all African passport holders. So it's not just the online process for incorporation, but also immigration is done visas are applied for online. Also, we have, in Nigeria, we also have the one-stop shop where you can do processes including your visa application, which is now the visa on arrival. You have the one-stop shop where you can also do the apply for your business permit, your registration with the NIPC, which is the Nigerian Import Promotion Council. So you do all of that in the one-stop shop, and seamlessly in less than a week, you're ready to operate your business.
Yorm, I'm sorry to come to you on this topic, but on the issue of currency stability, which I know that Ghana struggled with over the last few years, what would you advise investors to build in their contracts in dealing within your region or similar regions that struggled with currency stability to ensure that their businesses continue to be profitable, or that they hedge, against significant currency instability? And as a lawyer, how would you be able to assist investors in achieving this?
Okay, thank you so much, Zion. So the market in Ghana has been significantly affected by the confluence of high government debt and ongoing economic crisis, resulting in notable repercussions such as heightened inflations, there's been escalated cost of living, and then increased interest rates. But this is not to say that there's been a positive outlook for the country in recent times. So there's been long-term trajectory of the Ghanaian market, and the optimism is grounded in several factors which are open. So we have the government debt restructuring. Coming to the issue about how to protect our clients in terms of what terms you should put in the contract, you should know that there's political stability in Ghana. Yes, so that's a big factor for us. And then for us, we'll help our clients with clear reporting in terms of their financials, so they don't have any problems with the authorities.
Thank you very much. I think previously, the whole of Africa, we operate across the continent. It appears that investors have previously seen Africa as one country, and the strategies have been to deal with every single country in Africa the same way. I think it's evident that each country in Africa, represents an opportunity, unique opportunity. Nigeria, for example, is one of the destinations where the margins are unheard of, in other climes. But then you do have infrastructural problems. Navigating this investor requires engaging with local professionals, especially legal and tax professionals, to look at the all 9 yards of what the country presents and structure your projects in ways that would allow you to avoid the pitfalls. Sometimes having a cross-border or regional sort of agreement or setup in terms of your structure, your holding structure, helps to increase revenue, also helps to avoid revenue loss. And this is what Centurion continues to do for its clients across board. I think we will save some time to have questions from the audience about certain issues they've had across the continent, and perhaps ask. We wouldn't give too much of free advice, but ask about how some of this issues could be dealt with, and how to engage properly with local authorities. We do suffer an issue of nomenclature in Africa, whereas you probably call it lobbying in the US. In Africa, you probably call it corruption. But what you have in terms of engagement with authorities, you must always engage, because there are options for bespoke arrangements and not to take the default position. And this is where seasoned lawyers and tax advisors can really help to structure a deal for you that makes your investment very profitable. And usually it's not a win-lose situation. It's a win-win situation for the investor and government. For example, I'll give an example of one of the things we did in Equatorial Guinea, whereby when you have an engagement with government, a sector, the oil and gas sector, for example, you have to make payments at the Ministry of Justice or Lands or whatever it is, you could designate that ministry you're dealing with as sort of a local operator, like an administrative operator, to ensure that those payments are made. So you have one point of contact, and obligations are given to each party to their strengths, because the best contract is not the one where you have all the advantages. It's one where the appropriate parties are given obligations that they are most suited or conditioned to fulfill. So engaging with local council is not just a nice to have. I think it's synchronous on to having smooth investments in all these jurisdictions, which, as we've said, recognize that Africa is a place to make a good profit. So I'll leave it to the audience to ask a few questions, and any questions from the audience, please? The mic's out back. I will take it that all our investors have properly satisfied, and that you do have not encountered any issues across the continent. Oh, just one question over there.
Since we're talking Africa, my name is Oluseyi Afolabi, CEO of Reservoir and Facility Solutions Nigeria Limited. And Centurion is a global organization, at least able to see all across Africa. So in just one sentence, which of the African countries have the best tax regime when it comes to oil and gas industry? Thank you.
Which of the countries has the best tax regime?
Okay. Well, I do not want my panelists to have a fisticuff on this. I would say Nigeria for very selfish, very selfish reasons. But I mean, the fact is, I would leave this to panelists to answer some of these questions. You do recognize that for the oil and gas industry, your investment would be based on the availability of resources. So if you have spotted investment in the country, you would have to deal with the tax regimes within that. And what we have realized that investors prefer bad terms to inconsistent, regularly changing terms. So Nigeria, for example, has recently passed its PIA, and we recently had the first award under that. Nigeria lost billions, told billions of dollars, based on the fact that there was just no clarity on what the tax regime was at that point. As I've said before, each investor has an opportunity for a bespoke deal based on the origin of the investor, based on the local participation. There are different dispensations in terms of oil and gas licenses. So taking advantage of what the local players are able to obtain in terms of tax incentives, and co-investing with them could reduce your tax burden for, as you saw in Nigeria previously, from 65% to about 30%. So again, engaging with local counsel, local lawyers, and professionals within the jurisdiction would help. So it's not so much about which country has the best regime. All these countries, believe you me, have regimes that are hidden within the regimes, that allow you to do good business across the continent. But you must engage with us. Just pay our fees and you'll be happy. So I would ask, Grace, as a tax lead in the CEMAC region, which also is quite prolific in oil and gas, to perhaps have some comments on this.
Okay, yes. So as Zion said, there are regimes within regimes. So we have the General Tax Code that governs all tax issues in a country, but behind that, you also have the regulators who always sign other laws whereby it gives advantages, but specific advantages to investors. For example, in Cameroon, we have the law of 2013 that gives advantages to private investors. And these advantages, at times, they vary but the phase of investment at which the investor is at. So it all depends on what you are coming into a country for, but we should not only look at the general tax laws that apply per country. Based or depending on what you are going out for in that country, you can always get further advantages. That's why you need local councils to guide you properly on what to do and not limit yourself only to the general tax regime that is applicable in the country. Thank you.
And I would say, like, once this is sorted in which jurisdiction that you're going to be working, if you have the right structure, you can also benefit from effective tax in Mauritius as well, which is like 15% or 3% as well.
Exactly.
So that's quite also interesting.
Gary?
Just before we proceed, just to add to that, Keseena already mentioned Mauritius has DTAs with over 40 countries across the world. So depending on the home country of the investor and the country you want to, invest in, you also have that option. So that is one of the advantages of having Mauritius as your hub in coming into Africa.
Gary?
I'd like to add that there's an unseen tax that comes in form of a cost that is not found in the books of law of a country, and this is the cost of doing business in the country. As an investor, you want to make sure that there's no cash leakage, there's capital preservation, and then there is revenue protection. There's certain nuts and bolts I think we've all touched on around the table on that need to be in place in not just the tax system, but obviously things like independent courts that are sophisticated, that can enforce contracts, because contracts are another source of revenue leakage. You need a banking and financing system that understands how, that you can comfortably, house a treasury function for a business, and you need an availability of professional services firms from an accounting, legal, like Centurion perspective, that know how to allow you to navigate around these pitfalls, that could, easily lend themselves to massive leakage. Never mind how good the tax code looks like. So those are the kind of, things that for which we can provide bespoke solutions in terms of structuring, in terms of legal advice, and obviously policy knowledge, which is very important because the law does change depending on policies, So there's that unseen tax, as it were, if I were to call it, that we always need to be mindful of. That's why I think it's important for us as African professional advisors to seek best-in-class approaches to all these issues, so that we transfer skills amongst each other, and a private sector player that wants to play across the continent is a same customer or client experience, irrespective of whether that client, meaning interfacing with local regulators, with the government, with local partners. If we have a common mindset in terms of approaching these kind of things, then that unseen tax becomes less of an issue.
Thank you. And it's cliche, but as I say, the law is, man is not made for the law, so a business is not made for the law. The law is made for businesses and man by extension. What we've seen is that investors sometimes do not anticipate the opportunity of being held by the hands, by local lawyers to influence policy, and ultimately influence the law, and engaging with the authorities to ensure that, things are done in a way that works for them. Perhaps adopt the Apple strategy and advise government what they should want, as opposed to, taking what is there and running with it. I've seen from multinationals to very small countries try to structure, permit my language, structure the hell out of, their investments within these jurisdictions. And it's like choosing whether to walk or run in the rain. You get wet either way. So the idea is to understand the landscape based on, local advices, engage where you have to, understand how to run, with the investments. So some of these countries are quite profitable. I've worked in, I think, South Sudan for about 7 years, and you'll be amazed at the amount of, business that's being done, the amount of opportunities on tap that exist within these jurisdictions. With proper guidance, a lot of business could come out of these entities. I don't know if there's any further questions. Otherwise, I'll just leave the last words to, okay, we have 2 other questions.
Thank you. My name is Cosmas Lematia from Uganda. In the context of Africa, African countries have come out strongly on national content, participation of the locals in supply of goods and employment opportunities. And it's also a fact that in many countries, as one of the panelists has put forward, that the locals are underpaid. How, in relation to regulatory frameworks, how best can African nations ensure that the locals benefit fairly as they promote investors? Thank you.
Thank you. Before, I would like to mention that, as legal counsel, advising on both sides, perhaps governments and, a local private sector and also investors, there needs to be some sort of, say, an average position where business can be done. Allowing business to thrive ultimately benefits the local setting. The fact that business will not be done based on local content rules alone, I think becomes injurious even more and for the oil and gas sector, for example, the level of capital intensive nature and also the level of skill required mandates that government be continuously open to rules that are flexible enough to, are in tandem with reality. Well, we are lawyers, and we ensure that we want the rule of law, we want benefits of locals and the local private sector. But perhaps what you've spoken about is perhaps something that there has to be an engagement between investors and government on where all of the interests lie and what would be the best solution to ensure that business is done. Because ultimately the countries that allow business to be done, and I'll speak in practical terms, Tanzania, Uganda, and Ghana discovered oil at the same time. We're speaking of several years down the line. You know what Ghana has done with the oil and gas sector, and you know where Tanzania is. And some of these issues are issues that were brought to the fore. So sometimes you're unable to jettison that development for just local content rules. When the when the industry grows, and there's development in the country, the externalities that flow down to indigenes and the local private sector, and the engagement for foreign investors is not just between the foreign investor and government. It's a three-way, engagement. You have the foreign investors, you have the local private sector, and you have government. The real player is the local private sector, where the real jobs come from. Money in the hands of government is not, as efficient as it will be in the hands of the local private sector. Just my 2 cents on that point. And Rachel, I see that you were going to say something.
Yeah, actually in South Sudan, according to Labor Act, has given opportunity for foreign investors in terms of employment. But also when you are investing in South Sudan, our Investment Promotion Act says that you have to have 80% as national staff in the company. So to answer him, that there is a balance in terms of doing business in other countries.
I will also add to that in Equatorial Guinea, for example, there's very good local content. There's a lot of local on these that we work with the government and the private sectors as well, that allow employees to be trained. We know a lot of matters that we work on that we've sent nationals to go and study abroad and then come back and work in those companies and all of that. So there's a lot of progress in this, and I think like we need to keep going about that, and obviously South Sudan has a good regime in place as well.
And just to get to I think what's important as well is, irrespective of the model of local content or indigenization or local ownership that you adopt, I think what's important for investors, I would imagine, is that the rules have to be clear, they have to be predictable, and have to be communicated to the market. And obviously they need to be sensible as well. I think that's important, because you could impose any manner of rules, but if the investors don't have that confidence that these rules make sense commercially or economically, then they won't achieve their intended purpose. And of course, that doesn't take away from the imperative to industrialize the continent and take, its population along with it. I think it's important for SMEs to be involved in these large energy infrastructure projects. That's indispensable and not open to question. I think it's how you do it, how you interact with the market, with investors on the rules. They understand the rules. They have confidence and comfort that those rules are predictable, and when they're applied, they are going to be applied consistently and predictably. And are communicated clearly as well, that these are the rules and this is why we have them in place. I think that could help along the process of local content implementation in these projects.
Thank you. I think we'll take the last question, if there's one more, as we have just 5 more minutes. Just the last question.
No, there's room for one more question. Just one question before we start. Does anybody have a question?
Back there.
Where?
Over there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Yamena Nepembe from Namibia. My question is, one of the challenging issues in the oil and gas industry is profit shifting and revenue leakage. And so far, the OECD have implemented the global minimum tax. Is the African country ready for adopting such initiatives?
Thank you. Perhaps an obvious confession, this session we target for the investors who perhaps would like to shift their profit a little bit. But to answer that, I think the rules within in-country are becoming a lot more sophisticated. And Africa has always had this copy and paste advantage to adopt some of these rules. And we've seen that, increasingly some of these issues are getting to the fore, and a lot of consultants are coming in country to help to first assess the leakage, that exists, because you must understand and digest the problem properly before you're able to propose solutions to it. So I think for me the short answer is yes. I don't know if I think African countries are ready. I think they've continued to engage now, both with consultants that deal on the subject and also with investors themselves. To find a win-win, solution, perhaps if you do, relax the rules to enable investment to thrive. There's more for both parties to ensure that, and then having strict rules so that whatever minimum that you have specified in the countries, investors are more inclined to observe those rules and stay within, the confines of laws and regulations within the countries. I don't know if there's a last word from any of the panelists. Otherwise, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this session.